What's going on, guys? This is Mr. Teej 66's Movie Reviews. I am Mr. Teej 66. Today, taking a look at an old school not comic book adaptation, like a superhero film from the early or middle 90s. 1994's The Shadow, starring Alec Baldwin. Now, this movie was pretty hyped up for its time. The character is based on the movie's based on a character from the 1930s. Starred in a radio drama for I don't remember how long it ran for, but I've listened to some of them, on YouTube, and they're actually pretty good. I mean, if they're of their time, but if you're into that sort of 30s sort of style storytelling, I would absolutely recommend it. And a series of pulp novels William Gibbs, I forget his name. William Gibson, I think is his name. I could be getting that wrong, but he wrote like a couple hundred of them. I mean, like 100, 200 some stories. I mean, he just like churned these out like crazy. But I have read a couple of them, and they're pretty. Again, they're fun if you're into that sort of thing. But then the character pretty much went dormant, I believe, after the 1940s. Like nothing really, no new product was being made. Although apparently there were in the 70s, I believe, DC Comics produced a series of comic books, but it didn't really ignite the character's popularity that much anymore. So by the time this film came around in 94, I mean, no one really knew who the Shadow was, or, only older people. And, I think that's why it died, it's such a terrible death at the box office. Just, no one knew who the Shadow was. I mean, I remember the marketing for this movie was actually pretty big. I mean, there were posters, there was action figures, a canceled video game, which was never released, which I only heard about like a couple years ago, but they really put some effort into marketing this movie, and apparently it did very well the first weekend. It did okay, but then they had movies like Forrest Gump and, The Lion King, which just steamrolled all over it, and it didn't really do that well, and they were planning on starting a franchise, as they always do with these kind of things, and it never materialized, and it's really too bad, because this movie is flawed as it is. This is a fun little 1930s superhero comic book. It's not based on a comic book, but it feels like it could be a comic book movie. The plot concerns Lamont Cranston, who's played by Alec Baldwin, who starts off as like a drug lord in the Far East named Yinko, and he's captured by this band of but this group of like monks called the Toku, and they teach him to basically use his inner evil, his inner demons to fight evil. They teach him to cloud men's minds, fog their vision through force of concentration so he appears invisible. And the movie also puts in sort of like a Jedi mind trick sort of power where he can actually manipulate people's minds and, make them forget things. You can tell, I don't know if George Lucas consciously stole that from The Shadow or not, because I don't know if that was in the original pulps or the radio show. I'll have to check on that, so don't quote me on that. And so he's sent back to New York to start fighting crime as a masked vigilante called the Shadow. And eventually, Genghis Khan's descendant shows up. Shiwan Khan, played by John Lone, who, what else? Wants to take over the world. What a surprise, because he wants to follow in his ancestors' footsteps, Genghis Khan. And the Shadow has to stop him. And apparently, he was also trained by the Toku to use his mind powers. He basically has the same powers as the Shadow. And it's really a great hero dynamic, because it's the best kind, where the villain is truly the flip opposite of the hero in almost every way. First things first, probably the best part of this movie, the production design. This movie is beautifully shot. The sets are absolutely fantastic. Even if you hate this movie, you have to give props to the art direction and the basic look of it, because it has this 1940s pulp, sort of comic book Art Deco influenced style, which is just a treat for the eyes. I mean, I love old pulp, sort of 1930s and 40s films like this, so I have a soft spot for it. So I may like it a little bit more than some people, but props to the set design, fantastic. The cast is for the most part is great. Some of the actors are underused. First, you've got Alec Baldwin playing Lamont Cranston, the Shadow, and I think he's absolutely great in this movie. He has that sort of handsome, sort of rugged, good looks, that leading man looks. But he's just there is something weird and just dark and twisted about him, like his eyes, especially in his voice. When he's in the Shadow costume, he has this great cackle he does that the Shadow always did. The famous line. I think even people who've never heard of the Shadow know the line. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. And his cackle is great in this movie. I mean, it's one of the, there's one point where he cackles where I would think even Batman would go, "Whoa, this guy has got problems." But overall, I think he would have been a fantastic Bruce Wayne, Batman. And apparently he was considered for the role in Tim Burton's first Batman film. I love Michael Keaton, no question, but Alec Baldwin would have been an interesting choice as well. And then you've got Penelope Ann Miller playing Margot Lane, his love interest, and she's okay. I'm not really a big fan of her. Visually, she does look very much of the period, so I will give her that, but I just find some of her line readings to be flat and just kind of dull. And, there is some chemistry between her and Alec Baldwin. They have a few funny lines. In fact, a great exchange about dreams, which I won't spoil because, well, maybe I will a little later, but, she's adequate, but not especially memorable. John Lone as a villain is great. He just hams it up, not quite chews the scenery, but takes little nibbles of it. He never goes completely over the top like, say, Jack Nicholson does. But as I said, he's the flip side of the hero, and, he's just fun to watch. Not especially deep villain, but, that's okay. I like me a little mustache twirl, as I've said in other videos. You've got an eclectic supporting cast. You've got who else do you have here? Oh, you have Ian McKellen as a scientist, as Margot Lane's father, a scientist, and he does okay. His character is a little wasted, though. He's a little wasted, though, because it's Ian McKellen. He could have done so much more. You got Peter Boyle as the cab driver, Mo, who basically drives the Shadow around, and he has some funny stuff to do, but again, you kind of wish he was given more. The always great Tim Curry has a part as Ian McKellen's assistant, and it's Tim Curry. He's just a blast to watch every time. Again, doesn't do a whole lot, but for what he's given to do, as usual, he does an absolutely spot-on job with it. So the cast is good. Just some of the actors feel a little, underused. They're great actors, and we wish they would be given more to do. The story is, your basic evil villain wants to take over the world thing. The movie's gotten criticism for its story, and come on, it's not supposed to be Shakespeare here. It's I have to fight the villain, whatever, it's fine. I don't really hold it in, that much disregard or anything like that. It's totally acceptable for what it is. The special effects, because this movie had some of the first CGI used, I think this is 94, so yeah. Some of it's aged well, some of it hasn't. There's a flying dagger which goes all around, which is a little hacker, just stupid looking and fake, and it's okay. But then there's also shots where the Shadow's invisible. He grabs a guy, by the scruff of his collar, and you can sort of see a ghostly outline. It's pretty cool looking. That stuff is held up very well. But let's see here. Things I didn't like. There is a couple things. The Shadow's powers aren't always quite defined. There's a scene where basically he tries to influence Tim Curry's mind, and Tim Curry basically goes, "No one controls my mind, Shadow," and so it's oh, his powers don't work on this guy. But then later on in the movie, he does it again, and his powers do work on him. He starts fucking with him and making him see stuff, and you're wait a minute, I thought his powers didn't work on him. It's a little confusing. And there's also scenes where he's fighting a bunch of goons, and they see his shadow on the wall, because his shadow is the only thing he can't contain or hide. So they fire arrows at his shadow, and suddenly he comes out of the wall, and I'm wait a minute, I thought he was invisible. It's confusing as hell, and it's a little wait, that doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. The opening scene, while cool, it shows him being Yinko and being a bastard, While it is good in setting up his character, it's a little shortchanged. You really wish they had explained that a little bit better. But in a way, I'm kind of glad, because we're spared another origin story. We have to sit through the origin for an hour straight. I mean, I like origin stories, but sometimes it's best to just get to it. And the movie does, basically, in less than 10 minutes. He's in New York. He's the Shadow. So I'm sort of half and half about that. Like, and on one hand, it would have been nicer if it had developed that side of the plot a little bit more. But at the same time, it's great to just get right to it, and we don't have to, think about it and just deal with all that crap. Yeah, it's just, I mean, as again, some of the supporting cast is a little underused. I really wish they had used them a little bit better. But that's really about it. This movie is a lot of fun. I mean, if you're the action is competently staged, but if you're looking for like The Matrix or something like that, don't bother. This isn't that kind of movie. I'm more concerned with atmosphere and characters and I guess plot somewhat than is with action. There's some action and it's coherently staged, but don't it's not a thrill-a-minute ride. I wouldn't say action wise. I mean, it's a period film. I guess the closest thing I would compare it to would be the first Captain America film, the first Avenger from back in 2011. If you like pulpy sort of, fantasy, superhero stuff, this would be a pretty good substitute. It's not a perfect film, but I would give it an 8.5. I think this movie's a lot of fun. The Shadow, check it out. Anyway, that's all for this week, and I will see you next time on Mr. T 66's Movie Reviews.